Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's broadcast will be on the rule of law. What does it really mean? The rule of law. I'm happy to have two brothers with me that are experts in the field of law. One of our brothers is a retired criminal defense attorney. He's been on the broadcast with us on a number of occasions, Brother Mohammed Bashir, and he's now retired, but still engaged in justice-related issues on another front. He's a businessman, and he's also a commentator. The second guest that will be with us today is going to be joining us for the first time, Brother Sharif Silmi. He is an attorney who, on the civil side of the practice of law, he specializes in immigration law. And again, I'm looking forward to a very rich conversation with these two brothers on this very thought-provoking hot topic today. Without any further ado, let's welcome them both to the broadcast. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum Sharif.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Bashir. How are you doing?
Good.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, brothers. Let's begin today's conversation with your thoughts on. Before we begin the conversation with the two of you, Brother Sadiq, there's a piece of video that I'd like for us to see starting out with this broadcast today. And then we'll have the brothers weigh in with their opinions on it.
And so in this next clip, Tucker Carlson weighs in on the Derek Chauvin trial, but more importantly, what he believes regarding the Anglo-Saxon political tradition. Watch.
We've got to make sure they know we mean business, she said. Well, that couldn't be clearer. Do what we say or we'll kill you. That's the message. Maxine Waters doesn't have much use for those Anglo-Saxon civic traditions like jury trials. Her demand was very clear. Convict Officer Derek Chauvin of first-degree murder or we will burn it down. No one asked the question, is Chauvin actually guilty of first-degree murder? And the answer is, you may believe he committed a crime, and he may have. But no honest person who has watched the trial would tell you he is guilty of first-degree murder.
A lot to unpack there. Now, obviously, Tucker Carlson did that segment prior to the jury finding Derek Chauvin guilty of all three charges, which includes second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and also second-degree manslaughter. And Tucker Carlson, much like other right-wingers in the media, have decided to latch on to what Maxine Waters had said about essentially encouraging activists to take to the streets and continue to demand justice. He certainly put words in her mouth there. She did not say what he claimed she said. But nonetheless, what's amazing is that he seems to care deeply about jury trials and where they originate from. It's just that he doesn't care enough to actually look at the origin of jury trials. But luckily, we have super dork Brett Ehrlich looking into it for us. And we got a little bit of a history lesson this morning during our production meeting. So let me give you the details on where jury trials come from. The Lafif in Maliki jurisprudence developed between the 8th and 11th centuries and stipulated that 12 members of the community would swear to tell the truth and reach a unanimous verdict. Sounds sounds like it actually comes from Muslim culture. Doesn't really go along with his narrative there. Let me give you more. In the 12th century, Henry II of England similarly instituted a jury system of 12 free men charged to uncover the facts of the case with the same characteristics as the Lafif system. He was likely influenced by his exchequer, Thomas Brown, who formerly worked under the Diwan of the Kingdom of Sicily, which had recently conquered the Emirate of Sicily and incorporated Islamic government and legal systems into their procedures. Sometimes the truth hurts, Tucker. Sometimes it hurts.
That was a long way to go and a huge payoff. I'm so glad you read that and that Brett brought that up. Wow, Islamic law, eh? Looks like we owe that our, due process to Islamic law.
My brothers, who wants to start out? What are your thoughts on that little piece of video there?
Go ahead, Sharif. You start with that.
It's felt that, when water is present, tayammum is not needed. So, well done, Brother Bashir.
Alhamdulillah, that's exactly where I was going with that. When things are evident, there's no sense in producing evidence. So
quite interesting. Yeah, I mean, this would come as a shock, no doubt, to probably the majority of the American public, including Muslims. I mean, the vast majority of Muslims are not aware that the jury system that is held up as the example of the standard by which proceedings of this nature should be governed by comes from our Islamic tradition, and certainly this would cause many of Trump's blind followers,
Yeah, Sheikh Saalakhan, it's interesting actually also that this is something that's steeped in the Maliki jurisprudence,
yes,
which we know now is preserved through mostly the West African Muslim community, and those in fact were the first Muslim community, most likely the first Muslim community to have established Islam in North America. So I think when we're looking at the context of North America and what's been going on here, and how so-called rule of law is implemented, it's been sort of morphed or maybe devolved into, I think, and I don't think I'm going too far to say this, a tool of oppression. When we just consider the prison population in the United States, being overwhelmingly Black people, and that the of course juries and judges are overwhelmingly not Black people. We just I think can take a moment to consider whether this is truly the rule of law, or whether it is in fact the rule of men that are using the law in a way that is, oppressive in its nature. I think, many of your listeners obviously are in South Africa, and there's no, I think, maybe, education or reminder needed to talk about what a colonial settler state looks like for our South African brothers. So I think whether we're looking at the United States, or the previous apartheid regime in South Africa, Australia, or any other colonial settler state, they like to celebrate the rule of law. But I think the way in which it has been implemented and practiced is not consistent with the stated principles that they're based upon.
All right.
Yeah, that's interesting. In fact, the The observation you just made, brother, reminds me of something that Niccolo Machiavelli said. He advised the monarchs of his age in his book, The Prince. He said that there were two ways of fighting. One was with arms, and the other was with law.
Right.
And he advised the monarchs of his age, the princes of his age, to use law as a weapon of war. And this is something that, not only is the work of Machiavelli studied in, some of the leading universities, colleges and universities around the world, not just here in the United States, but around the world. But the advice that he gave is advice that is very much in effect today.
Facts.
By virtue of how we see this instrument called law being used.
Facts.
Go ahead. You wanted to weigh in here, Brother Muhammad?
Well, just to say that one of the things, I think Sharif is dead on point, but one of the things that another takeaway from the video that you saw is the concept of rule of law comes directly from the Maliki thought process, the Maliki method. The idea of the rule of law that is implemented by the West, it comes directly from them. I mean, think about it. This is the way they define the rule of law in the West. It says the rule of law is a principle under which all persons, institutions, and entities are accountable to the law, and that the law has to be publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated. These are strictly Islamic concepts. Mm-hmm. Now, they take the Islamic concept and then they implement the Machiavelli part of it. So the rule of law in the ideal, which is what you'll find in almost all colonization, they give you the ideal and then they treat the people in a totally different reality. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you start with your Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, right? Mm-hmm. So they start with a premise that they have no intention of enforcing. They take and therefore they give the people the ideal, the reality under which that they govern the people, which they, because they're giving you the concept of the rule of law, because they're giving you the concept of all people are created equal, they're giving you the ideal when in fact their intent is to use a totally different reality, to live a totally different reality. And frankly, that comes in, 1452 with the papal bulls that usher into the concept of the doctrine of discovery, into the doctrine of Christian discovery. So it's interesting that the person that they were critiquing was Tucker Carlson, who was a Christian nationalist. And that was the birth of Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. The papal bulls that said, go out and destroy the Saracens. They were talking about those West African Arabs who had controlled Europe from 711 to eventually 1492 when they were eventually run out. Destroy them, destroy anyone else, and whoever doesn't convert to Christianity, you're allowed to seize, take their land, destroy them, and turn the land over and everything else to Christ. This is the way they described it. Mm-hmm. And that has been the doctrine, that the reality that they've lived under, even though they are promulgating the Islamic concept of a rule of law that is demonstrated by equality and the acceptance of it by the people. So when you mesh those two, you see the Islamic concept being manipulated under a Christian doctrine that was used as an art of war.
Mm-hmm. Now, Muhammad, you given this dichotomy that you are very much aware of now, when did you become aware of this split in the way that we profess to be about the rule of law versus the way we truly are, and what made you decide And I'd like for you also to weigh in on the same question, Brother Sharif. What made you decide to go into the study and practice of law? I want to hear from you and then from Brother Sharif on the same question.
Wow. This is going to really sound strange. I'm born and raised here in the United States. I'm educated through what people would call Arab Afro family. So I have always known the difference between what is Islamically sound and what is secularly sound. The difference between the reality and the ideal has always been taught to me. So when Adam Clayton Powell in 65, 63 said, we need you to be true to what you say on paper. When Dr. King said, we need you to be true to what you say on paper in 64. These concepts were already known in our community, that the culture was not being true to what it says on paper. And so we always had something to compare it to. So we never fell into the propaganda of it. So I never had the opportunity to fall into the propaganda to where I actually believe that the culture really abides by its laws. We were taught that they shape their law around control over the people. All right. This is why your Supreme Court can issue a case that says that police officers, as you saw in Uvalde, have no duty to protect the citizens. All right. They don't have a duty unless, of course, they put themselves in it. Then they have a duty. But the court says they don't have a duty to do that. They say protect and serve on the side of their car. It means to protect and serve the city, the culture, the property. It doesn't mean to protect the city. We knew that as far back as the 60s, the 50s. All right. And we taught the Islam that was taught to us was taught along that line. Don't mix your Islam, because Islam is the reality. What they're offering you is an ideal that they think is compatible with Islam, but the reality they're offering you is a reality of oppression. Now, how I got into the law, truthfully, since I was 5 years old, my mother told everybody I was going to be a lawyer. But when I got out of Howard, I left Howard undergrad, I was on my way to writing books and journalism, etc. And I spoke to some people, and my mother had passed away, and they said, look, very least you can do is fulfill your mother's dream. And there was a professor named Samuel Yett. Professor Yett was a journalism professor at Howard. He wrote the book, The Choice. Brilliant book, by the way. And he said on graduation day, graduating from undergrad, he said, are you going to law school? And I was waffling back and forth, and he stayed on me. Even the year I took off, he stayed on me, go to law school. We need advocates. We need advocates. And the idea that I thought that I was raised on a different dichotomy, a different understanding between the ideal and the reality, that's what forced me back to law school. And that's what forced me to immerse myself into trying to help our community understand what goes on in the real world versus what they give you as a reality. The whole idea of equality under the law. Equality under the law is an Islamic concept. You just heard it said. All right. But the idea of how it is that it's enforced here, it's an ideal. They tell you you can get equality. A black man in America has never, for one day, I challenge everyone, for one day, seen equality under the law. Justice under the law. That's an Islamic concept that was adopted because, again, the Muslims who left West Africa in 711 and went into Andalus controlled Europe and their education for 800 years. So they are biting off of Islamic concepts and then realizing that they want this grasp of power and the resources that come with your Mansa Musa trip around the world, your Songhai, Mali empires, and seeing the gold and the riches coming out of there. When they give you these stories in history about they're going out to looking for herbs and spices, etc., no. They were going by virtue of papal bulls, they're called, edicts from the Pope, saying, go out and conquer these people and convert them to Christianity. And so everything that comes under their concept of how to implement this thing called rule of law is based on domination, and it has nothing to do with the ideal. The ideal is thrown out for the people to accept as something to reach for, as opposed to the reality that they live in, which is oppression.
And Brother Sharif, I'd like to hear from you, brother. You know, you've started this. You have a law practice. You have your own firm right there in Baltimore, and I did a little background reading up on you, brother, and you're a very well respected practitioner in your field, especially in the area of immigration law. And we have seen very vividly how this area of law has been used as a weapon of war, especially post 9/11. How and why did you come to the decision to go into law and to practice in the field that you practice in?
Yeah, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. You know, I came of age. So first of all, I'm a member of the Palestinian diaspora. Although I was born in North America, my parents had actually left Palestine in the 60s and to study. And my father was a student at San Jose State University in Northern California. And so he left in 1966. We are from Jerusalem, and we all know what happened in 1967 with the the Arab betrayal of the Palestinians and the swift occupation of Al-Quds, Palestine, and the rest of Palestine. So being that we have been dispossessed of our land and our rights as the indigenous people of Palestine, coming of age in Northern California, and if you just as a kid, you're just maybe have CNN in the background with I think at the time Wolf Blitzer was kind of a young reporter who was a former editor of the Jerusalem Post, and kind of presenting himself as this objective journalist, and you see the narrative that's being put forward, and you realize that this is absolutely, completely, and totally detached from reality. This is a fiction that they're selling. And I think what it made me understand is that, well, if they're lying about Palestine, then it means they're lying about everything else. They're lying about other oppressed people. They're lying about what the government's trying to do with regard to its policies and whether it's domestic affairs or other foreign affairs. It's a propaganda arm for the U.S. government. And when you're in Northern California, you have access, I think, to a lot of information, and maybe different thoughts and different ideas and patterns. I mean, like Berkeley and Oakland were just stone's throw away from where I was, and I think that really exposed me to a lot of different perspectives. And so once I kind of pursued that avenue, I've always had I got married real young, so I needed to provide, and I was always kind of like in a business minded person. And then but I still had that real commitment to justice and trying to find how I can operate maybe at a different scale. So I did pursue an undergraduate degree initially, and then did attend law school, and I selected a law school that where I was to focus on international law, and I did complete an international legal studies certificate with one of the gentlemen who's actually a special rapporteur on water law issues, international water courses. And so that was really my focus initially. And after completing my studies, I actually went overseas and wanted to kind of work with developing, kind of like using international law and various facets to kind of advocate for rights of, mainly the Palestinian community. And I think, to be honest with you, the institutions that we have as Palestinians are wanting, to say the least. And I found it quite difficult to, make an impact that was productive. So after I think that running its course, I came back to the U.S. And I think within the U.S., one of the most important ways in which we can engage internationally is through, helping individuals move, whether it's from coming in for a particular business purpose or family reasons, or definitely humanitarian based immigration, and that sort of allowed me to kind of practice. And then of course 2016 happened with Donald Trump becoming president, selected as president by the Electoral College. And then, with very, I think, overt anti-immigrant policies that we had to face and confront and battle, it hardened me, I think, in terms of, my ability to, fight for folks and deal with it. Of course, I think we all remember the Muslim ban and dealing with that. And there was a lot of people, whether it was Syrians or, folks from Yemen. And there's still, I think, we could say there's still a Muslim and African ban. I wouldn't, I just take, for example, we're talking about, to be honest with you, I have no other way to describe this than a fiction of rule of law in the United States. It is a total fiction. For example, if one is waking up this morning in Germany and they are seeking to apply for a student visa because they want to study at one of the universities in the United States, and they have a college transcript, and let's say they study in somewhere in Germany or Europe, let's say Salzburg University, and they have their degree, and now they want to come to the United States. They will be issued a student visa, within a day. Okay, literally within a day. Now, the same, his classmate, also at Salzburg University, but who happens to hail from South Africa or from, maybe the Gambia or Senegal, and he applies for a student visa, he can probably, think about a 2-year wait at best, and such a background check and a thorough thrashing of intentions and circumstances that God knows if he'll age out or of the need to even study at that point. So I think that we really have a lot of serious issues to confront with regard to the policies of the United States, and it doesn't matter whether it's so-called Democrat or so-called Republican. They are maybe they have a bit of a different discourse, but when it comes to actual policy, there's very, I think, little difference in the administrations, particularly the State Department. And I don't think we're going to get into it, but Defense Department's a whole nother story. I think we're seeing even a more aggressive militarized policy with the current administration than past ones. So there's really, I think, a lot to deal with and confront, and it's almost like we're just going. We don't know what battle to choose every single day because we're confronted on so many different so many different levels.
Mm-hmm. Brother Muhammad, on that question of policy and practice and the disparities that our brother just outlined, on how different groups can be treated by those who exercise the instruments of quote unquote law. One of the most well-known political pathologies in the world today, not just in America, but this is something that is known throughout the world, is America's domestic history with the use of law as a weapon of manipulation, oppression, and war against African Americans. From the use of the slave codes back in the day to the Jim Crow laws. Reflective of this history is the poetic critique of Langston Hughes in his celebrated poem, Justice. He said that justice is a blind goddess, is a thing to which we blacks are wise. her bandage hides two festering sores, which once perhaps were eyes. This was his critique of what the Statue of Liberty has come to symbolize for some versus what the reality has been for many. As a retired lawyer who saw and experienced much in your years of practice, what are your thoughts on this history? How much progress, in your opinion, has America made toward becoming a land of liberty and justice for all?
You want a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being having maxed and gotten liberty,
Yeah.
one being 1619 project, where Black people were brought here intended to be slaves.
Yeah.
America is at a 2. And I'll give you the history so that there be no doubt, because people have a tendency to see the Black experience and think that Black people are making it up. So now you have the 1619 project. 1619 is when that first ship lands in Jamestown, right? And they create this first settlement. But it's created on the doctrine of discovery, meaning they're coming here to this particular land. They've already captured some people whose land that they have attempted to conquer and turned them into slaves. They've already ousted, with 1492, with Columbus, they've already ousted the Black Muslim, for lack of a better way, and I'm not talking about Black Muslim like Nation of Islam. I'm only using Black in terms of a descriptive, so nobody be offended by that, so that you understand who it is that they're dealing with. These are the people who controlled Europe and controlled Portugal, Spain, etc. So it was a religious conflict. They now have ousted them, and they come to this new world, and they find the same or similar people here. They begin to enslave them as they begin to move into Africa, the people who gave them their jurisprudence, etc., and begin to try to find ways to enslave them, because again, they will not convert to Christianity. They come here, and after the first generation, you're talking about 1690. That's the first generation. At that particular point, these people are written into the common law of Britain and etc., because again, the colonists down, they're developing colonies, and they're still under the rule of the British. They're writing into their local laws, the Black man cannot have a weapon. Black man cannot own land. The Black man, if he converts to Christianity, then he can become a landowner. All these things are directly connected to Christian nationalism. This is why all these politicians out there now are telling you that this was created as a Christian nation, and they don't really recognize that part of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution that says the Establishment Clause, saying that the government will not establish any religion and will not impose any restrictions on your free practice. They're not willing to accept that, but they never have been willing to accept that. Let's jettison now to 1776. The people who are waging war against Britain for their independence, they have you believing in the ideal. The ideal is taxation without representation. What were they taxing? Rum? What was their biggest product? It was slaves. This is the government wanted to put taxing on their slaves. The British wanted to put taxing on their slaves because the British fought on their behalf against the French and fought against the Spanish in the South in Florida and the French in the North. So they wanted to put a tax to be able to get their money back, and they wanted to tax their slaves. Again, right in the heart of it is Black America. When they put their Constitution together, the South has no chance of gaining any power, even though they have all the resources. They have the cotton, they have and they have the free labor of the slave. But they have no chance of gaining the power that a city like New York or Boston has, because there are more people there. What do you think they do? They come up with a 3/5 compromise in order to give, because again, in your House of Representatives, you gain your power by the number of your population. Since they didn't include slaves as humans, they couldn't count them in their census. So they came up with a compromise. The compromise, though, helped the North as well. So it gave more income, more representation to the South on the back of Black slaves. but it also opened the door for the North, who became the business bankers, the insurance companies, the Harvard universities, the colleges, the building, etc., like that. Your Wall Street is built on the back of black slaves. Again, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, the people of the United States, that's the first line of the Constitution. It doesn't even mention black people. It doesn't mention them at all. Even in the fugitive slave law, it doesn't even say black people. It says people who escape, other persons who escape. You're not mentioned. So again, every time a black person starts talking about the law and the history, etc., people look at it crazily, like, oh, all that's over, it's over, it's over. Well, if it's over, take me to the 13th Amendment, 1861, because the rule of law at the time was Dred Scott versus Sanford. A black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. So after the Civil War and black people joined the Union Army to fight for their own freedom, nobody gave them freedom, Abraham Lincoln. They fought for their own freedom, 200,000 strong. They earned that freedom. Immediately, they passed the 13th Amendment saying slavery and indentured servitude are abolished in the United States. And it's the only amendment in the Constitution that has an exception to it. And what's the exception? Except upon the commission of a felony. Do you think that is coincidental that on the heels of that peonage happens during Reconstruction? That voiding contracts of slaves or ex-slaves because the slave worked the land or the ex-slave worked the land and they didn't pay him his money and he got upset and yelled at the white man and the white man said he threatened me and they charged that as a felony and how he's on the chain gang back into slavery? If you think that's a coincidence, how then do you justify mass incarceration in 1980, from 1980 till now, from Bill Clinton on? How do you justify that? The same concept. How do you justify private prisons? Because in Maryland, right where Sharif is right now, black people make up 30% of the population. They make up 72% of the prison population. In New York, they represent 20% of the population. In the prisons, they represent 55% of the population. In New Jersey, where I'm from, they represent 12% of the population. They represent 62% of the people incarcerated. And each and every time that they get to the point, that America gets to the point to where somebody says, be true to what you say on paper, they just change the law. They come up with something called stop frisk. They come up with something called racial profiling. Because again, they have no interest in not giving back the power that comes with justice. The most dangerous word in the Constitution and in this culture is equality. Anybody who speaks equality has to be a revolutionary. Because in order for you to have equality in America, it would mean that all that was stolen and all the lives that were damaged by this ideal that they gave you, that you wound up believing in, thinking that you could go to court and get fairness and treat it with justice, etc., when a white boy can get probation and you can get 5 years in prison for the exact same offense with the exact same record, for all of that to flip and become the issue of equality, they would literally have to give back everything that they stole from Black America. And it's never going to happen, which is something that I learned practicing law. It's never going to happen unless the people who need to see justice work are in the forefront. I mean, in the forefront of making sure that justice works. That's what the fear of what happened in the 60s was in America. That's why COINTELPRO had to shut down Malcolm. That's why they had to shut down King. That's why they had to shut down Hampton, because they were rallying people around the people who needed to see change most in America and saying that these people need to be the voice that's in front of the changes here in America.
You know, if I may interject, you know, my home state of California, the liberal bastion, the left-wing state of California, just in June of not 2012, I'm sorry, not 1912, not 52, but in 2022, June of 2022, California, left-wing liberal California rejected a amendment to its constitution to ban involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. That's how deep this is.
Yes, how deep. Yeah.
Or look at your private prisons. People get when these fires were burning in California and in Oregon, who was putting out the fires? Prisoners. When you passed your safe sentencing act, your new sentencing act, and everybody lauded it, they were so excited over it. All it did was take private prisoners and say you could work your way into some mitigating factors toward your sentence and reduction of your sentence, but you're only getting paid $2 for whatever it is. That's free labor. Yeah. They are still picking peaches in Georgia. They are still sewing uniforms for McDonald's. Corporate America has moved into the prison industry, and they need prisoners. And who do you think they need? Who do you think the prisoners are set up for? Go to your 13th Amendment. This is why you have a distinction between whites who commit the same offenses and they get probation, and blacks who get prison, because they need that product, that free labor, the same free labor that they had in 1619. So now, take your scale now from 1 to 10. If they're still having free labor and it's on the backs of black people, and they had it in 1619, and black people are still falling for, or the culture is still falling for, the ideal that you can rise, freedom, justice, and equality, and it doesn't exist, then you can't get higher than a 1 or a 2.
You know how they do it, just to interject again, it's like, right now, let's say tomorrow, there's big, mass popular awareness about this modern day slavery from, the prison system. All corporate America's got to do is say, you think inflation is bad right now? You think look what we're going to do to you if you try to ban this.
Right.
The cost of your clothing is going to double. The cost of your shopping is going to triple. We're going to inflict so much pain on you, middle America, if you even think about freeing these people from indentured servitude or slavery, that people are going to back off. They're going to get scared. People are scared. They're easily controlled. This is manufacturing consent. And the other point I was going to make is, just take a look, just to illustrate the point a little further. Take a look at the opioid epidemic taking place in the Midwest among poor white people. And as Muslims, our heart goes out to those people, and may Allah guide them and give them shifa. But look how the government dealt with those people versus how they dealt with the drugs which they themselves introduced to African American community. And it's very clear. All of a sudden, we had to get tough on drugs and war on drugs and tough on crime, and this is going all the way through. And now all of a sudden we need to have treatment programs, and we need to have a new way to deal with it, and we need to have a thoughtful policy on drug rehabilitation. Why? I'm glad they're doing it. They need to do it to everybody, but why now? Why not before? But these concepts didn't exist. I guarantee you all the scientific research, all of the publications with regard to how to deal with and treat individuals who are addicted to drugs existed 20 years ago. It existed 30 years ago, existed 50 years ago. But why is it now relevant? This is
right. I'll tell you why, Sharif.
Do this.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Ehrlichman, who was Richard Nixon's Secretary of State, told you why. He said that there was a war on blacks. He said that we knew that we could criminalize the blacks. Why? Because of their history. We have always criminalized them. We knew we could criminalize them with heroin. We knew we could criminalize and therefore shut down white liberals who were beginning to understand the plight of Black America, what Black America was really arguing. We could criminalize them on the media every night with marijuana, right? And they asked him, are you saying there was no drug problem in America? He said, no, there wasn't. We knew it wasn't, but we couldn't come out and say we were anti-Black. That would never fly. And that's exactly what goes on every generation. Whenever you need somebody as your scapegoat, you go back to your 13th Amendment. You can always criminalize Black people. This is why when I'm trying criminal cases, I'm always wondering, why is it that every time they raid a particular neighborhood, it's a high crime neighborhood and it's black. How could it be so high crime? It's the old Malcolm expression. We got more police in our community and more crime. How could that be?
Yeah.
It's because they're an occupying army.
Yeah. Brother Sharif, on the international front, we've just spent some very valuable time looking at this whole question, this issue from the domestic side. On the international front, there is perhaps no greater example of the violation of international law, which America has had a huge part in helping to craft, than the decades-long occupation of Palestine and the never-ending violation of the human rights of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Your thoughts on this and on what's happening right now in Gaza?
So, again, it goes back to the first statement that I was making with regard to how colonial settler states operate. And when we look at so-called Israel, we need to look at so-called Israel in the through the prism of a colonial settler state. And the European migrants that established that colonial settler state, I think, are pretty much following the same playbook that every other colonial settler state used. So to connect it to the topic of the discussion, of the conversation, rule of law, we see that so-called Israel uses or weaponizes its law in a way to dispossess Palestinians through rules such as absentee owners law, where, for example, an individual is a national or citizen of a state that was, quote unquote, at war with so-called Israel in 1967, then the state has the ability to seize that individual's property. So, of course, everybody was a national of a so-called enemy state. If, you consider so-called Israel to have been at war with Jordan, and they use that to take and in fact steal the, very, very important, valuable property of both Muslims and Christians, by the way, in Jerusalem. So this is something that we see. And then when we go into, the occupied, so-called occupied 1967 territories, then they're even more blatant. I think through, just the use of military orders, they've seized and taken land. And this is really, I think land is a really major issue here when we're talking about Palestine and how they're, going about, dealing with the Palestinian people and the situation there. The other point I would make is that whenever you have elections within the so-called Israeli community, I wouldn't really characterize it as true elections, because obviously it's a election of made up, or the voting population is limited to by the colonial settler state. They like to kind of flex their muscles, so they have this new prime minister who is kind of a caretaker role, and because of the upcoming elections, he wanted to kind of show his ability to murder and kill at the same level of who would likely be his opponent in that election, Benjamin Netanyahu. So they went ahead and bombed the Palestinian community in Gaza, who already are, as many of your listeners know, are basically living in an open air prison, the most densely populated, poor area in the entire world. And I think maybe it's neck and neck with Yemen. So it's really interesting to me, and I think that I would also like to mention that countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, Egypt are participants in this war against the Palestinian people, and we shouldn't shy away from that. I mean, if we need to, I think, mention that and be very clear about the role of the Muslim traders and Arab traders in this, because it's nothing new. I mean, I think as Palestinians, we always mention that we have we have the toughest enemies and we have the worst friends. So, that's our reality. And I think we can draw a lot of connections with what has happened in South Africa and even in North America. With regard, we know that there's a lot of joint training exercises taking place between United States police departments and so-called Israeli forces. Obviously, the United States is the biggest funder and provider of weapons to so-called Israel. We know that so-called Israel is essentially a base for U.S. military forces in the region to kind of dominate and control. So I think that when we look at Palestine and what's going on there, I think it's a really important test, not only because of the human rights conditions and in which the Palestinians are dealing with, and that's our test. And we know that it's very much a blessing to be from Palestine. It's mentioned in the Quran, in Surah Al-Isra, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed the land of Palestine and its surroundings. And there's also many hadith that discuss the blessings of being from there. And we know, obviously every Muslim probably knows that the verse of Tini wa Zaytun is discussing Palestine. So look, we have to deal with it. This is our test in this dunya, and we know that this is just a material world, and eventually it's going to go away. But I think that the real test for us who are outside of Palestine is, what are we doing about the situation? And we know that our brothers and sisters in South Africa are standing very firmly on our side. And I've never met a person from the Muslim community who was not, and I would say the real Muslim community who was not supportive and with Palestinians. But I think that because of our situation in North America and the access to politicians and maybe getting attention from them, that the elites among the Muslims within North America and the United States in particular have sort of distanced themselves from the Palestinians in a way that is kind of in their short-term interests, and they'll be exposed for that. I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to embarrass them, and that's just part of the process. So Allah musta'an. I think we're believers, and we just know that our martyrs are guaranteed paradise, and that they are destined, the oppressors are destined for the hellfire. So that's our principle. That's how we look at it.
Absolutely. Something. Did you want to say something, Muhammad, on this?
Alhamdulillah. Yes, that's it.
The subhanallah. When you mentioned, Brother Sharif, the UAE, and when as soon as you mentioned the UAE, the first thing that came to, and you also mentioned Egypt and also
Saudi Arabia. I'll mention it again.
SubhanAllah, it really is heartbreaking to see the level of hypocrisy, the contradictions within our ummah, and there is a need for Muslims across the board. And you don't have to be a scholar. You don't even have to, be someone who is immersed in, a study of the sacred knowledge. If you're just a committed Muslim with a heart that that feels for those who are being oppressed the way that we are supposed to feel. There should be a clarion call within us that we have got to address these contradictions that as you put it, the elite, those who are put forward as the leaders, locally, nationally, internationally, are guilty of. We have got to hold them accountable. I mean, I thought about our brother Assam Ghafoor, you know, an American-born Muslim. His roots are in India. His family's roots are in India, but he was born and raised in America. He is a lawyer. He was, you know, someone who became an advocate for someone who was killed in a very brutal way, and
Jamal Khashoggi's attorney.
He was his attorney, and this brutal murder that took place, that took on international significance. I mean, this is a very prominent issue within and among politicians and the media here in the United States. But yet, you know, we have this American-born Muslim who was just traveling through. I mean, you know, and it was an international flight that, you know, he had to make a connection in the United Arab Emirates, and he's taken off the plane and then informed that he is going to be, you know, punished for a trial that took place in absentia that he was not even aware of. SubhanAllah.
They're learning. They're taking their lessons from the Israelis. You know,
yes, they are.
Very clear. It's very
yes, they
clear.
Are.
Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, to a certain extent. Egypt, I think, is still, I think, I would say, not fully 100% in the axis of Israel. It's pretty close. I mean, they're definitely implicit in the you know, crimes against the Palestinians. How far they go, I think, is yet to be determined, because I think, you know, we could see their own people rise up again. And I would just maybe take one thing I would say, just to be, you know, I think fair, is that there's a very big difference between the Saudi Arabian government, the United Arab Emirates government, and the people of Saudi Arabia and the people of the United Arab Emirates. I think that there is some, you know, a big difference. You know, those people are themselves oppressed in a way. So I think we have to just, you know, distinguish that. But yeah, I mean, it's really, in fact, I think that Muslim Americans need to really just not travel to United Arab Emirates. And when the brother passed away, may Allah have mercy on him, from the Maghreb Institute, and I saw that he passed away in Dubai. I thought, you know, Allahu A'lam, maybe they you know, they slipped him something in his food. I mean, I don't know if it was a natural death. I'm not going to speculate, but I really think it's high time that you know, we make sure that people are, you know, kind of being careful of traveling there at this point.
I agree. And in fact, that was another thought that came to mind. I certainly would not. I remember on one of my international trips, I did have a connection through the airport in the UAE, and if I remember correctly, it was Dubai. The thought that came to mind when I heard about Assam Ghafoor is that, you know, if I have any other international flights to Norway, or, you know, I finally make it to South Africa, and, you know, there's an option presented to me of flying through the United Arab Emirates, I mean, definitely I would not want to take that option, you know, just as a matter of principle. I wouldn't, both as a matter of principle and as a matter of security. I wouldn't want to take that option.
I mean, you know, we have our agreements and sometimes, you know, internal, you know, love critiques of American Muslim organizations, you know, including CARE, for example. But I mean, like, CARE is not, you know, I mean, they're not the most, you know, I think, you know, radical group by any stretch of the imagination. They're as mainstream as it gets. and they were declared a terrorist group by the United Arab Emirates. I mean, that's how crazy these people are.
Okay, brothers, I knew that this time was going to fly by. We got a few minutes left. I want to quickly get your thoughts on, whether or not you have been following the closely. I'm sure that you have been following it to some degree, but have you been following closely the January 6th hearings that have been taking place? And if so, what are your thoughts? Especially as it pertains to the punishment that those who have thus far been convicted and sentenced, the punishments they have received versus what our Muslim brethren here in America have received for cases involving quote unquote conspiracies that never became anything else. For case in point, and I know you want to weigh in on this, Brother Muhammad. Case in point, there's a petition drive that's just been launched. I think it's maybe a month old. Just been launched for a case that I know well out of New Jersey, the Fort Dix 5 case. I was present in that federal courthouse in Camden, New Jersey, for that trial from start to finish. SubhanAllah, man, the Duca brothers, 3 of them, and there were 2 other brothers that were also involved in the case, but we'll just take the Duca brothers because this is the petition that's just been launched by the youngest brother. SubhanAllah, man, these brothers, they were accused of being involved in this conspiracy to attack the Fort Dix base, military base. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened. The evidence against them was specious at best. I mean, clearly there was no hard evidence to support them having ever been involved in a conspiracy. But even if they had been involved, SubhanAllah, nothing ever happened. It was a conspiracy by tongue. If for the 2 brothers that actually did engage in discussions with these agent provocateurs, these FBI paid informants / agent provocateurs that were, egging these brothers on to talk along certain ways. Nothing ever happened. These brothers got life sentences. Now, we look at, one of the persons who just went to trial in the insurrection, the January 6th insurrection of 2021, just went to trial. He lost. He has received the heaviest sentence of all. Now, this is in a case where the U.S. Capitol was breached in a very violent way. You had people who were seriously injured. You had people who died, who lost their lives. This man got, I think, 6.5, 7 years. 7 years. 7 years. 7 years. So again, have you brothers been following this, these hearings that have been very revelatory? And if so, what are your thoughts on what has transpired up until now?
Father Sharif.
Go
you don't want to hear what I got to say.
This is your domain. Okay, I'll just say one thing. He'll be out in 3, maybe before that. But go ahead, Brother Bashir.
MashaAllah. By the way, what you didn't say about that was that he was the black guy.
Really?
Are you serious? Are you serious, brother?
Yeah. So of all the people out there, the person who got the biggest sentence was the black guy. Now, I teach a class at Ibn Taymiyyah in Maryland every Saturday. And I tell them the first rule is think like a Muslim. The second rule is that in the United States, if every drug dealer got together on a Wednesday and agreed to not sell drugs on Wednesdays, on Thursday, Congress would get together and pass a law saying it's illegal to conspire to not sell drugs. That's the nature of the conversation here.
Oh,
what they do with this particular case is you 100% right. When you look at Fort
Dix.
Right, in Jersey, when you talk about that, in all conspiracies, there has to be an overt act. You can't have a conspiracy without an overt act. You can have people agreeing and talking about everything, etc., but you have to have a link, an overt act, something that you did that was criminal to lock you into this particular conspiracy. Without that, nobody should be found guilty. Now, the problem that I have with the January 6th hearings is the January 6th hearings have no teeth. They're public. They're public theater, for lack of a better word. They can't charge at the highest level. They can just tell you what happened at the highest level. And how could they possibly have information at the highest level that the State Department and the Justice Department don't have? Can you imagine 2 weeks ago, the Justice Department was asking them for the young lady's transcript? The young lady who came in and just blew the whistle on the argument that went on at the White House between the people who were conspiring to overthrow the government and Trump's lawyers who were saying this is crazy. And they didn't have that. Well, what are they investigating? Because here's what you have. Let's take the conspiracy from the bottom. You have all these people rallying to come here, putting on social media. We're going to go wreck the town. We're going to spill blood. We're going to take the country back. So you know that they're coming there violently. Now, when you get there, you have tape recordings that show that they are armed. You already know because you saw on the tape that night somebody planning a bomb here. They never have figured out who that person is. You now know from the investigation that there were bombs planted all around the place. They were just waiting, according to the defense of the guys who are actually charged with sedition, right? The Proud Boys, etc., are actually charged with sedition. Their defense was what? We were waiting for a call from Trump. We thought we were patriots. We thought what we were doing was legal. We were waiting for a call from Trump to say, move on the Capitol. These were the guys who were armed, who had stacked weapons around the thing. Why would they be waiting on a call from Trump? Because one of Trump's right-hand man, who he pardoned when he got convicted, Roger Stone, is a Proud Boy. He's part of they who do his security. What's the general's name? The other nutcase, etc., who says that you can overthrow the government by violence and it would not be unconstitutional. General, whatever his name is,
Flynn.
Right? So if you put those two together, and they are on the right hand of Donald Trump, then that leads you to what? The top man. It gets better. He's got Secret Service. Remember in his debate, he said to you out loud, I got the military and the bikers on my side. He said in one debate, who you want me to denounce? Proud Boys, stand down and stand by. Those are the same kind of link pin conversations that you're having in these conspiracies that are convicting Muslims all over the world. And then gets better. Now they've scrubbed all of the tape recordings or the text messages that go directly to January 6th and January 5th through 3 different departments: Secret Service, Homeland Security, and I think there's one other, right? How do all of them get to coordinate scrubs? Look, you're not looking at just the people on the street always get the brunt. Remember Bacon's Rebellion back in 1672. The poor whites get the brunt. The poor blacks get the brunt. The people at the top always get away. They use those people. These people had the intention of overthrowing the government. These electors from these 5 separate states, etc., they're not there by accident. That was a coordinated conspiracy to overthrow the government at the highest level. And guess what? So that you get a clear understanding for all your audience who don't know what it's like to be black in America, there would never be an argument about January 6th, except if you go to those 5 states, the 5 so-called battleground states. Where was he contesting the votes? He was contesting them in Atlanta, where the majority of the votes that came through against him were black. In Milwaukee, where the majority of the votes that came through him came from the black community. In Pennsylvania, where the majority of the votes came from Philadelphia, the black community. What he was saying to the world and to everyone is, how dare you allow black people to vote me out? The black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. When he makes that call to Atlanta, Georgia, and he says, I need 11,000 votes, he was saying to the governor, when you ran for governor, you knocked off 100,000 votes to get to beat Stacey Abrams. How come these black people have their vote back now when it's my turn? That's what's going on the underside that nobody will tell you. That this has always been about the black vote and the potential that black people have to wield power in America, and they do not have any authority from the government or from the institution called America to wield any authority. You heard it here.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and that's going to have to be the last word, unfortunately, because we are at the end of this hour. We've gone a couple of minutes over. Let me thank both of you for joining me today for this thought-provoking conversation, as I knew it would be. And inshallah ta'ala, we are going to do it again. May Allah ta'ala bless the rest of your day, and inshallah ta'ala, we are going to be in touch. Thank you very much, my brothers, for joining us here today. I'm going to say assalamu alaikum to you, to both of you, and close out as we traditionally do with this broadcast with an invocation from Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wattawasaw bil haqq. Wattawasaw bis sabr. Which means, in translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere in the struggle. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.